My family has always been a strange kind of chaos. The kind that wears smiles to dinner, pretends everything is fine until someone's fork hits the plate too hard, and silence falls heavy across the table. I'm the youngest of three sisters, the peacemaker, the comic relief, the one who somehow ends up being both invisible and indispensable at the same time. When things got tense, I'd find a way to distract everyone, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a spill. Once, quite literally, by choking on a breadstick mid-argument, because apparently my survival instincts are comedy-based. My oldest sister, Maya, was the golden one. She was everything I wasn't: decisive, ambitious, magnetic in the way people with unshakable confidence are. She'd been the first to move out, first to get engaged, first to make mom cry tears of pride instead of frustration. And Jason, her fiancé, he was the kind of man you could fall for quietly, without realizing it was happening. The kind of man who made you feel seen just by listening. Tall, calm, thoughtful. He wasn't loud, but when he spoke, people actually paused. The kind of guy who remembered birthdays, who noticed small things, the way you stirred your coffee, the color you wore when you were happy. Everyone loved Jason. My parents adored him. My middle sister, Serena, called him the only man in this family who can fix things without making them worse. Even the dog used to sit next to him like a loyal disciple whenever he came over. And me. I loved him too. A little too much. It started with harmless admiration, I swear. I was barely in my 20s, stumbling through my own mess of failed relationships, and Jason felt like stability personified. He'd ask about my classes, actually remember what I told him, and once even drove me to the airport at 5 in the morning because my car wouldn't start. I remember sitting beside him in that half-lit car, the radio murmuring some old jazz song, thinking, Maya's so lucky. But luck can twist itself into longing before you even realize it. The night that changed everything is burned into my memory like it happened yesterday. It was one of those doomed family dinners, the kind where everyone shows up pretending they're fine, but tension leaks through the walls like smoke. Maya had been fighting with Mom about the wedding, something about the guest list, or the budget, or maybe just years of unspoken resentment disguised as logistics. By dessert, Maya was furious. You know what, Mom? She snapped. You don't want a wedding, you want control. Mom rolled her eyes, wine glass trembling in her hand. And you want a show. You've always wanted an audience, Maya. I remember gripping my napkin, praying someone would just crack a joke, that someone would just stop. But no one did. The silence stretched like elastic about to snap, and then Maya slammed her glass down, stood, and stormed out, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Jason went after her, of course, but he came back alone. She needs some space, he said quietly, as if apologizing to the air itself. Everyone slowly dispersed, muttering their own brand of disappointment. I stayed behind, leaning up the table because it was easier than facing the echo of what had just happened. That's when Jason came back into the kitchen. He rolled up his sleeves and started helping me without saying a word. It should have been ordinary, just a man helping with dishes. But that night, under the dim kitchen light, something shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the wine still buzzing in my head, or maybe it was just the years of unspoken admiration curdling into something I couldn't swallow anymore. He passed me a glass, our fingers brushed, and I looked up. He smiled, that kind, tired Jason smile, and asked if I was okay. That was it, the question that broke me. Because I was okay. I hadn't been for a long time. I was tired of being the one who soothed, who balanced, who wanted quietly while pretending not to. So I said it. If you weren't with Maya, I think I'd be in love with you. The words came out trembling, unplanned, like a truth escaping from years of denial. For a second, the world went silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I expected shock, or anger, maybe even disgust. But what I saw in his face wasn't any of that. It was relief, and that somehow was worse. A week later, the wedding was canceled. Nobody said it outright, but everyone knew something had broken, something that couldn't be mended with apologies or excuses. Maya didn't speak to me again. Not that week, not that year, not for 5 years after that. Jason moved out of state soon after. I heard through the family grapevine that he took a new job, started over somewhere far away. Mom refused to say his name for a while, as if mentioning him would invite bad luck. And me, I became the family ghost. Still invited, still there, but somehow half present. Sometimes I wondered if I'd ruined my sister's life. Other times, if I'd just set something inevitable in motion. Either way, I carried that night like a scar under my skin, invisible, but impossible to forget. 10 years is a long time to pretend that something never happened. Long enough for guilt to lose its sharpness, for memories to fade at the edges, for you to convince yourself that the worst thing you've ever done was just a bad dream you grew out of. After Maya stopped talking to me, I did what cowards do best. I disappeared, moved to another city, changed my number, cut my hair, told myself that starting over was the same thing as redemption. I found a small apartment with a cracked balcony railing and a view of a coffee shop I couldn't afford. For a while, that tiny distance between me and my old life felt like freedom. I kept myself busy. Work, friends, half-hearted dates that never lasted past the second drink. I learned how to live in that fragile balance between solitude and silence, and I told myself that I'd forgiven myself, even if no one else ever would. Then one Monday morning, I walked into my new job at a nonprofit, a place that smelled like coffee and ambition, where people talked about making a difference, with the kind of idealism that made you want to believe them, and saw his name. Jason Carter, head of operations. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought it had to be another Jason, or a coincidence, or maybe the universe playing a cruel joke. But when the door opened, and he walked in taller, sharper, his hair a little grayer, but his eyes exactly the same, every illusion I'd built for a decade shattered in a heartbeat. He didn't see me right away. He was talking to someone, his voice low and calm, that same tone I used to listen for from across a room. When his gaze finally found mine, he froze mid-sentence. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, two ghosts colliding in daylight. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered before I could stop myself. He blinked once, then smiled, a restrained, professional kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said quietly, "this is unexpected." That was one way to put it. The next few weeks were a masterclass in controlled awkwardness. We were polite, civil, efficient. He was technically my superior, which added a layer of humiliation I didn't know I still had the capacity to feel. We spoke in short, tidy sentences, like strangers forced to share an elevator ride that never ended. Morning. Could you review this report?" "Sure, thanks." Every interaction left me exhausted. I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying pressing down on every word we did. And yet, there were moments, brief, dangerous moments, where the air between us felt too familiar. When he'd pass by my desk and pause like he wanted to say something more. When our eyes would meet in a meeting room and stay locked a second too long. The tension wasn't sexual, not at first. It was heavier than that. It was history still breathing. One evening, we ended up being the last two in the office. The rain outside made everything quiet and small. I was finishing up a grant proposal when he walked past my desk. "You still do that thing with your pen," he said. I looked up confused. "What thing?" He smiled faintly. "Tap it against your teeth when you're thinking." I froze. I hadn't realized I was doing it. "Guess some habits don't die," I said softly. "Some shouldn't," he replied, then turned toward the window. There it was, the moment I should have walked away. But I didn't. I stood up, crossed the room, and said, "You could have told me you worked here." He looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in 10 years. "Would it have made a difference?" "Yes," I said without thinking. "I would have run the other way." That made him laugh. A short, tired laugh that still managed to sound like music to me. "I didn't know until your name came through HR," he said. "I almost called to tell you, but I figured, after everything, you wouldn't want to hear from me." "You figured right," I said, but there was no anger in my voice, just exhaustion. Silence settled again, the kind that felt less like distance and more like gravity. "You look good," he said finally. "So do you," I lied, because he didn't. Not in the way I remembered. He looked older, heavier somehow, not in body but in spirit. Like the years had taken something from him that he never got back. He hesitated, then added, "Maya got married, right?" I nodded. "A few years after you left. She's got twins now." He smiled faintly. "Good. She always wanted that." "She also always wanted you," I said before I could stop myself. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "And you?" he asked quietly. "What did you want?" For a long time, I didn't answer. Then, softly, something I could never have. And that was the moment I knew. Whatever I'd buried 10 years ago wasn't dead, just dormant. The weeks that followed blurred together in that dangerous way when something forbidden begins to bloom again. He started stopping by my office more often, under the pretense of collaboration. I told myself it was nothing, just two professionals working well together. But the truth was, the air between us had changed. There were late nights filled with unfinished conversations, glances that lingered too long, the kind of electricity that hums under the skin like a warning you ignore on purpose. I caught myself smiling at his texts. He started bringing me coffee the way I liked it. It felt like the beginning of something, or maybe the continuation of something that never really ended. And then one evening, after an exhausting fundraising event, we shared a cab home. The city outside was glowing, the kind of quiet that only happens after midnight. He looked at me, and for the first time didn't look away. "I shouldn't," he said. "I know," I whispered. But when he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. And just like that, 10 years collapsed between us. Falling back into love with Jason didn't feel like falling at all. It felt like stepping into a memory I'd left on pause. Familiar, dangerous, inevitable. It started small coffee breaks that lasted too long, glances that said too much. We never said the words affair or forbidden. We just built a world where the past didn't matter and the present was the only place that existed. Every rule I'd ever made for myself began to bend quietly under the weight of him. He show up by my desk with a smile, lean against the doorframe, and for a few seconds I'd forget the office, the noise, the reason why we couldn't be. Sometimes we'd go for lunch and walk by the river near the office. He'd tell me about the nonprofit's new projects, about his parents, about how different life was now. He never mentioned Maya unless I did, and even then, it was only in small, cautious pieces. "She's doing well," I said one afternoon, trying to sound casual. "Her twins are starting school soon." He nodded slowly. "I saw a photo of them once," he said. "She sent a Christmas card." I didn't reply. "Why not?" I asked. He hesitated, his eyes on the water. "Because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound like an apology." I didn't know what to say either, so I didn't. I just stood there beside him, feeling the ache of something old and unfinished. By winter, there was no pretending anymore. We were together, not publicly, not officially, but undeniably. It wasn't messy, not at first. It was quiet and deliberate, almost careful. We'd meet for dinner after work, or spend weekends walking in parts of the city where no one knew us. I'd tell myself this time it was different, that we were older, that we'd earned this happiness after all the pain. But guilt is patient. It doesn't scream, it waits. The first time he spent the night at my apartment, he sat on the edge of my bed and said softly, "Do you ever think about how much we've hurt her?" "Yes," I whispered, "every day." He looked at me then, not with guilt, but with something closer to sorrow. "Me too." And yet, he didn't leave. And neither did I. Months passed. The world didn't collapse like it should have. If anything, everything looked almost normal. At work, we were efficient, composed, even admired for how well we handled projects together. Outside of it, we were two people rebuilding something they'd once destroyed. Until the day Maya found out. I don't know how she learned. Maybe someone saw us. Maybe she heard his name one too many times from mutual friends. Maybe the universe just decided the secret had lasted long enough. She called me on a Friday evening. I still remember the sound of her voice, too calm, too cold. "So it's true," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. "Maya, don't," she cut in. "Don't insult me with explanations." I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. "You ruined my wedding," she continued, her voice trembling now. "You ruined my trust. And now, after all these years, you found a way to ruin my peace too. Was it not enough the first time?" I wanted to say that it wasn't about revenge, that it wasn't planned, that love sometimes comes back when it shouldn't. But how do you say that to the sister whose heart you broke twice? "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You're not," she snapped. "You never were. You just like calling it love so it sounds less like betrayal." The line went dead before I could speak again. Jason was waiting for me when I got home. I didn't have to tell him what happened. He saw it in my face. "She knows," I said quietly. He closed his eyes, nodding slowly, as if he'd been expecting it all along. "I'll talk to her," he said. "No," I said quickly. "She doesn't want to hear from either of us." He sat down, elbows on his knees, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. "I should have handled this better." "It's not just you," I said. "We both made this choice." He looked up at me then, and for the first time since we'd found each other again, I saw fear in his eyes, not of losing me, but of what we'd already lost. After that, everything changed. At work, the air felt heavier. We kept our distance, at least in public. There were whispers, of course. Offices always have them. No one said anything outright, but I could feel the judgment in the glances, the quiet questions hiding behind polite smiles. At night, Jason would come over less. When he did, he seemed distracted, carrying the weight of something he couldn't name. One night I asked, "Do you regret it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, but I hate that love always costs someone everything." I turned away before he could see me cry. A few months later, Maya sent me a short message. Just one line. "Don't ever contact me again." That was it. No anger, no curse, no explanation. Just a closing door. I cried that night, not just for her, but for the version of myself that still thought love could fix the past. Jason held me, silent, until I fell asleep. When I woke up, I realized that even though we had each other, part of me would always live in the shadow of what we'd done. And yet I stayed, because sometimes the heart doesn't care about redemption. It only knows how to return to the fire that once burned it. When Jason finally told Maya he wanted a divorce, the world didn't explode. It just went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything looks the same but nothing really is. He didn't tell me when he was going to do it. One night he simply showed up at my apartment, his face pale and drained, his wedding ring gone. "It's done," he said, and the way his voice cracked made my chest ache. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt guilt so heavy it almost knocked me breathless. He sat down on the couch, his hands shaking. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, "I expected this from her. I didn't expect it from you." I didn't know what to say. There were no good words left in the world. After that night, he moved into a small apartment downtown. I spent half my time there and half in my own place, though eventually it all blurred together into one, our coffee mugs mixed, our clothes folded into the same drawers, our toothbrushes side by side like a quiet declaration of something permanent. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like standing on top of a mountain I wasn't sure I deserved to climb. 6 months later, Jason and I got married. It wasn't a big ceremony, no guests, no music, no flowers. Just a courthouse, a couple of signatures, and a silence that felt both sacred and fragile. He held my hand the whole time, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles, and whispered, "We're finally here." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that we'd paid enough for the past, that the future might let us start fresh. But love doesn't erase what came before. It just grows around it like vines on broken walls. When I told my parents, I braced myself for outrage, for disappointment, for judgment. Instead, Mom smiled softly and said, "I always knew you loved him." I froze. "What?" She shrugged. "A mother knows. I just hoped you never have to suffer for it." Dad didn't say much. He just nodded, that slow, quiet kind of nod that meant acceptance, even if it wasn't approval. It wasn't the reaction I expected. It was worse, in a way, because it made me realize how much they'd seen, how little I'd hidden, how long this had been written into the story of who we were. Maya didn't show up. I didn't expect her to. She hadn't spoken to me since that last message. I'd sent her invitations to dinner, to talk, to maybe start over. Every single one came back unanswered. Sometimes I'd see photos of her online, smiling with her kids, standing beside a man I didn't know. She looked happy. She looked healed. And maybe that was enough. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something I needed to hear out loud. Jason, meanwhile, was thriving. The company he'd joined years ago had grown exponentially. After the restructuring, he was promoted, first to vice president, then, almost unbelievably, to CEO. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed the shift until one morning he came home with a champagne bottle and said, "They offered me the top spot." I hugged him, told him I was proud, told him he deserved it, and I meant it. But part of me felt a strange ache, a quiet fear, because now the world saw him the way I always had, charming, intelligent, magnetic. And just like before, I could see the attention gravitating toward him. Women at company events, reporters, business partners, all drawn to that calm power he carried without trying. Sometimes, at dinners, I'd catch them glancing at him, leaning in when he spoke, laughing too loudly. I'd smile politely, pretending not to notice, pretending I wasn't afraid of history repeating itself. But Jason was different now, older, more grounded. When we got home from those events, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're the only one I see." And for the first time, I believed him. He was good to me. Better than I expected, maybe better than I deserved. He helped me move into a senior role at the nonprofit, director of outreach. It wasn't favoritism. I'd worked hard for it. But he pushed for me, believed in me, made me believe in myself again. We bought a house outside the city, something small, elegant, surrounded by trees. The kind of place you could breathe in. On weekends, we'd drink coffee on the patio and talk about the future, about maybe adopting a dog, maybe having a child. For the first time in years, I felt peace. But peace, I've learned, doesn't erase pain. It just learns to live beside it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, thinking of Maya, of that girl I used to be, impulsive, selfish, desperate for something she didn't understand. I'd think about the look on her face when she found out, the sound of her voice when she said I'd ruined everything. And even now, years later, when I have everything I thought I wanted, love, stability, a home, part of me still wonders if she was right. If happiness built on someone else's heartbreak ever truly lasts. 7 years have a way of sanding down the sharp edges of a story. Ours used to feel like glass, glittering, dangerous, beautiful because it could cut. Now it's more like river stone, rounded by time, still shaped by what tore through it. Mornings are our quiet treaty. Jason is always up first. The kettle sings before I've fully returned to the world. He sets a mug on my side of the table exactly where my hand will land. The paper rustles on his side, my tablet glows on mine. Some days we talk. Some days we let the dog do all the conversation, padding between us with a sock it definitely stole. Silence used to terrify me because I mistook it for absence. With him, silence is proof of presence. We're here. We stayed. He still works too much. I still say I won't bring work home and then do. His calendar looks like a city grid. My outreach schedule looks like a weather map. But we've learned the truce. 2 nights a week with no screens, 1 morning a month when we play hooky, pancakes for dinner when the day has been unkind. He keeps meetings from colonizing Sundays. I keep guilt from colonizing what we've already made. My parents surprised me by refusing to turn our marriage into a referendum. Mom said, "I always knew what your face did when he walked in a room." Dad, a man who treats words like currency, gave me the only 2 I needed. Be kind. We have dinner with them once a month. They ask about the house, the garden, his board, my budget. They never say Maya's name. I don't force them to. Love doesn't always carry every weight. Sometimes it just makes space for the ones that won't be lifted. Maya never reached out. That absence stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a border. I respect it. I resist the urge to send letters that would only make me feel better and her feel cornered. I see pictures of her kids online, gap-toothed and glorious, building lives that have nothing to do with me. In my better moments, I hope she tells them wild stories about the aunt they don't know, a version of me with softer edges and fewer mistakes. In my honest moments, I accept she probably doesn't mention me at all. Both possibilities hurt less than they used to. We bought a small house with big windows and a stubborn lemon tree that spends all winter pretending to die and all summer proving it didn't. When it gives us fruit, we treat each lemon like a holiday. When it drops leaves, we pretend that's a strategy. Once, late at night, I told Jason the tree feels like us. Hard to grow, easy to misdiagnose, flourishing anyway. He laughed and said, "Then I'll be the pot, useful and not very poetic." He is wrong about that last part. His job became headlines and handshakes, the sort of visibility that teaches you how to smile with your whole face and none of your secrets. People lean in when he speaks. So do I after events in the car. He unties the knot of his tie like he's telling the truth a little closer to his own throat and says, "I don't want any of that if I can't come home to this." I believe him, every time. Not because I am naive, but because love is a practice and he practices. I'm still at the nonprofit, older job, truer voice. I write grants that feel like lifeboats and run programs that make rooms full of strangers talk to one another like they share a language. Sometimes I catch someone at the exact moment a hard thing unclenches in them. It feels like watching a knot remember it used to be rope. On those days, I come home vibrating with a kind of holy fatigue, and he says, "You saved a city block today, didn't you?" And I say, "At least the corner," and he kisses my forehead like he's knighting me with a spoon. People ask if we want children. We answer carefully. We tried, and then we tried differently, and then we decided that making a life sometimes means making room. We have godchildren and a guest room that never stays empty for long. We have a dog who loves me like I am his biography and loves Jason like he is a law. We have an extra chair at the table and a calendar that says, "Someday," without promising the date. It is enough on most days. On the other days, we let the ache sit with us and pour it tea. Once a year, on the week everything changed the first time, we do an inventory. We go for a long walk, name what we did wrong and what we did right, and vow to keep the former smaller than the latter. We don't perform penance. We practice accuracy. He says, "I hate the hurt we caused." I say, "I hate that the only path here was through there." Then we touch the old bruise with clean hands and keep walking. I used to think forgiveness was a verdict someone else delivered. Now I think it's a muscle you build so your heart can lift the weight of its own choices. When the past knocks, I don't hide. I open the door, let it look around, and then point to all the ordinary proof that we didn't waste the pain. The notes on the fridge, buy parsley, not cilantro. Again, the pair of mugs with different chips. The lemon grated over pasta, the 2 toothbrushes leaning toward each other like they've learned something. On our 7th anniversary, he asked me if I still regretted it being the path, not the person. We were on the back steps, night pressing its cool face to the windows. I thought longer than I did the year before and shorter than I did the first year. "I regret the losses," I said. "I do not regret the love." He nodded like a man who understood that sentences can be true even when they contradict. We sat there holding 2 truths and one another, and it felt like competence. If you asked me now whether I believe in soulmates, I'd tell you I believe in stubborn hearts and decent timing, in the humility to repair and the courage to refuse erasure, in the kind of love that stands all the way inside its consequences and still says here, with you, soulmates aren't fate, they're practice. They're the daily choosing when choosing is no longer dramatic, just faithful. The lemon tree put out 3 small fruits this year, ugly and perfect. We zested one, saved one, and squeezed the last into our glasses on a Tuesday that had not earned a celebration. We toasted nothing in particular and everything in general. He said, "To the life we built." I said, "To the cost we paid." We clinked and drank and let both toasts be true because they are. I don't ask the universe to absolve me. I ask it to keep giving me mornings like this, nights like that, and the stubborn grace to keep choosing what we are over what we were. And when the house is dark and he reaches for my hand in his sleep, I think, not with triumph, but with relief. We did not waste our second chance trying to pretend it was a first. We are not redeemed by forgetting. We are redeemed by tending. And this tended, complicated, honest life is the garden we get to keep. The lemon tree surprised us in the 8th year. We woke to a small constellation of pale blossoms clinging to the branches, stubborn as stars. Jason stood in the doorway in his robe, hair a mess, barefoot on the cool tile, and said, "They showed up overnight," as if joy sometimes travels at that speed. Silent, decisive, unannounced. Life had settled into its honest shape. We were no longer rehearsing being married. We were married. The dog had gray on his chin. The kettle had a new whistle after I dropped it and pretended I meant to. My parents learned to say Jason's name without clearing their throats first. In pictures, I noticed I smiled with my whole face, even on Tuesdays. I didn't expect the letter. It arrived in late spring, addressed in a neat, angular hand I knew too well. No return address. Just my name and our street, as if the path to me had always been obvious. I sat on the back steps with the envelope in my lap until the wood warmed under me. Jason came out, saw the postmark, and stopped. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't say, "You don't have to." He put a glass of water beside me and went inside, leaving the door open the way you leave a light on. The letter was short. "I am not writing to reconcile. I am writing to release. I built a good life. So did you. I will not pretend yours did not hurt mine to begin. I will also not pretend that hurt is the only thing that happened to either of us. Tell Mom to stop looking at me like I might break if she says your name. Tell Dad I read the paper the way he does now. We were not kind to each other. We were not careful with the truth. You chose a life. I chose a boundary. Both were choices with dignity. Do not write back. I read it twice. The second time the words felt heavier, like coins in my mouth. Release is not forgiveness, but it is oxygen. I put the letter back in its envelope and slid it into the drawer with the takeout menus and the recipes we swear we'll try. Jason reappeared, and I handed him nothing but a nod. "All right," he said, and the word meant, "I will help you carry the weight you don't name." That night we ate on the patio, the air soft and lemon-scented. I told him only the parts that belonged to both of us, that a door had not opened, but a lock had clicked. He reached for my hand across the table and didn't try to make it larger than it was. We toasted the small mercy of clarity. The rest of the year unfolded with the steady confidence of something well-tended. His company survived a scare, then grew again. Leaner, smarter. I took a sabbatical to build a pilot program that paired retirees with newly resettled families, a barter of languages and recipes and patience. Watching a widow teach a Syrian teenager to hem pants with a thrift store machine felt like a choir. When the pilot ended, donations poured in accompanied by notes that said things like, "This felt like home." A cool Saturday, we drove to the coast with no plan and a thermos of coffee. We sat on a low wall and watched gulls perform the same argument in two dialects. A little boy dropped his ice cream and announced his grief with operatic flair. His father crouched, offered a napkin, then a taste of his own cone. The boy sniffed, considered second chances, and accepted. Jason nudged me, chin tilted toward them. "Practice," he said. "You know," I told him. "I think we're finally good at the boring parts." That's the practice. We did not become saints. We forgot to call people back. We bought herbs we did not use. We had an argument about a lamp that wasn't about a lamp, and halfway through, remembered to pull chairs to the same side of the problem. The dog stole an entire baguette and looked unrepentant enough to run for office. Our friends divorced and remarried and moved and stayed. We learned how to show up for them without pretending expertise. The older I get, the more noble I find showing up on time with soup. In late autumn, my mother stood in our kitchen holding a lemon like a trophy. "This tree," she said, "refuses to learn despair." She held my face in both her hands and kissed my forehead the way she used to when fever was a thing you could thermometer into submission. "You look well," she said. "You look lived in." It was the highest praise she knew how to give. The only time I saw Maya that year was across a crowded museum lobby during a donor preview. She was with her children, taller now, unmistakably hers in their posture and their concentration. She did not look fragile. She did not look toward me. I did not step forward. But when her daughter laughed at something I couldn't hear, Maya's mouth softened in a way that made me recognize the teenager who used to steal my sweaters and dare me to be braver. I went home and stood for a long time at the kitchen sink, not crying, not stoic, just letting the feeling be exactly its size. On the night of our 8th anniversary, we ate pasta with lemon zest because superstition can be delicious. We listed the small triumphs of the year: a stubborn Grant one, a friend's surgery clean, the dog finally learning to wait at the curb, a neighbor's new baby named after no one and therefore after everyone. He asked me the question he asks every year, not out of insecurity, but out of ritual, a way to keep the floor swept. Do you still regret it? I looked at him, older, handsomer, easier in his skin. The man who had learned to put his phone down mid-sentence and finish the sentence. The man who brought me to meetings I did not have to attend because he wanted me in the room where he decided who the company would be next. The man who, when the past knocked, opened the door with me and said, "We live here now." I regret the harm, I said. I don't regret the life. He nodded as if agreeing with the weather. We keep paying forward, he said. We do, I said. We clinked glasses to the practice rather than the myth. Before bed, I took Maya's letter out again and read it one more time. Release, I've learned, is not a reunion. It is the absence of pursuit. It grants each of us the dignity of our perimeter. I slid the envelope back, turned off the kitchen light, and walked down the hall where our frames aren't symmetrical but are, defiantly, together. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the lemon tree, blossoms opening at midnight, fruit swelling in slow motion, 100 small stars choosing to become something else. In the morning, dew held onto the leaves like praise. Jason handed me a mug at exactly the right angle. The dog groaned the ancient groan of creatures who love morning less than they love breakfast. The kettle sang that new whistle that still startles me a little. I used to think redemption was a verdict handed down by fortune. Now I think it is a dailiness. The way you rinse the cups, return the pen, apologize first, check the pilot light, leave the door ajar for the breeze you cannot schedule. It is a garden with pests and weeds and the rude optimism of seeds. It is ugly fruit that tastes like sunlight. We did not fix the past. We turned toward the future and refused to waste the pain. When people ask me if I believe in soulmates, I tell them I believe in stewardship, in the care of what you chose and what chose you back. The lemon tree will forget us when we are gone. The next people in this house will wonder why the pot is so scuffed and why the kitchen drawer holds a single old envelope among menus and maps. Maybe they will keep the tree. Maybe they won't. Either way, morning will find them. Either way, the kettle will learn their names.